Show session, transportation, utilities, and capital infrastructure. This afternoon we'll be doing recreation and conservation at 1. Tomorrow, Saturday, there will be economic development first thing in the morning at 10, and meeting and fiscal productivity in the afternoon. So I guess after hearing what we need today, we're going to talk about how to pay for it tomorrow. My name is Liz Plater-Zyber, and I'll ask everyone to continue beyond me introducing themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Marina Corey, and I'm with DPD and leading up the effort on the comprehensive plan.
I'm Ben Northrop with DPZ, and I'm the project manager on the form-based code.
I'm Billy Hadaway. I'm with ETM, a different initial, and I'm a transportation engineer on the project team.
I'm Rob Fox. I'm with COC, just in City of Clermont. Deputy for Economic Development.
I'm Edward Erfurt. I'm with Strong Towns.
Nathan Norris with the City of Clermont, Director of Economic Development.
John Cruz, City of Clermont, Planning Department.
John Tadona, a volunteer, Planning and Zoning Committee, City of Clermont.
Anna Sinclair from Strong Town Clermont, resident, that's it.
Jenny May, a resident of Lopes, Clermont, and I'm on the planning and zoning commission.
Let's start over there. Would you tell us your name, please?
Denise Palermo, I'm with the Green Plant Society.
Vincent Nemick, Planning and Zoning Volunteer Commissioner.
Joe Kamasic, representing Wellness Way.
Valerie Schuett, CRA board, and downtown resident.
Todd Howard, former councilman, long-time resident, lifetime resident.
Lucas Beasley, I'm with ETM on the planning and zoning team.
Good morning, my name is Mike Prado, I'm a planner with Campus Line Associates.
Good morning, Eric Miller, transportation engineer, also from the Line Associates.
Ed Rashansky, I'm just here as a resident today.
Brian Baden from the City Council.
Hi, Tim Reddy, homeowner and citizen.
I'm Roxanne Reed, I'm with WGI, it's an engineering firm in Orlando, and I work for the planning department at WGI.
Eliza Giuliano, department.
Paula Wissington, planning and zoning.
Clark Monica, Monica and Associates, environmental.
My name is Brett Jones, I was in Clermont.
Stephen Elmore, Business Administrator of the Hill Church.
And Kimberly Horn is playing a role in Wood County currently, we understand.
Yeah, we're currently consulting to the Lake Summer NGO on some associated studies within Claremont, so we're going to listen and participate in that.
Obviously, we've been talking a lot about what happens outside the boundaries as well as within the city. I think we're starting, we've asked Billy Hadaway to make a presentation to start us off, and then we can focus on local issues.
Yeah, and I'm going to just give you a brief bio. I won't go into my 50 years of experience, but I spent 28 years at the Florida Department of Transportation, both in District 5, which you are within, in the Southwest Florida District 1 Central Office. So I was the State Roadway Design Engineer in Central Office, overseeing all the design in the state. My last tour with DOT, I was the District Secretary for Southwest Florida, and the Secretary brought me back in 2011 as a result of the Dangerous by Design report to lead a safety initiative for pedestrians and bicyclists. And I also led the implementation of Complete Streets today, which I'll talk about a little bit. And then my last tour in the public sector was as the transportation director for the city of Orlando for 5 years before I came back to consulting to join EPA. So I'm going to talk about how things can be done differently from a transportation and land use standpoint that helps to address some of the concerns with congestion throughout the state of Florida. But I'm first going to talk about how we got here. Here's the agenda for what we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the advances in safety as a result of Vision Zero and the safe system, and then where we can go from here to try to do things differently. I took a picture of this young lady walking with twins on Fowler Avenue in Tampa many years ago. because there were no sidewalks on the roadway system there back then before DOT started putting them in, just as a matter of course, because there was no other place for her to go. There are sidewalks on Fowler. This is near USF, and so there are a lot of pedestrian activity. One of our biggest challenges with safety is what we call the design speed. And for decades, all throughout the country, because of this association that all the state agencies are associated with, basically the guidance was to design the roadways for as fast as possible. And that's created a situation where we have, again, almost 40,000 people dying on our roads every year. And that's what got me focused in on the safety efforts, because we have not historically done enough to deal with safety. And obviously congestion is part of that problem, but the speed is a bigger part of the problem. And what I convinced the secretary back in 2014 is we couldn't keep designing a roadway system on the state and expect the fatality problems to get any better. So we moved towards the direction of designing, if we're designing a street in a downtown, it should look and feel very differently from a rural highway, right? That makes sense to people. And part of the problem with speed, and you can see this graphic here, and there's different graphics that show different statistics, but basically at 20 miles an hour, you're pretty safe if you're a pedestrian. You will still be injured, but there's a 10% chance that you might die. At only 30 miles an hour, which is our posted speed in many of our subdivisions, then the chance of being killed goes up to 50%. And 40, which is actually below what used to be the minimum speed on the state system, chances of your surviving aren't very good, and regardless, you're going to probably have a life-changing injury. And you can see what also is illustrated here. Our bodies are not designed to move at high speed, and so our ability to actually process information reduces as we go faster and faster. You may see it, but you're not able to focus in on those issues. And so Liz showed this yesterday. I refused to change it because I think it's a great graphic, even though it goes back many years. And so in the Sunbelt states primarily, most of us grew up after World War II. And what happened back then was that the automobile had more and more of a dominant role in shaping our land development patterns. But what happened at the local level, instead of having a network of streets, and you can see on this illustration, you might have a subdivision, an apartment complex, an office building, or a school. Every single trip goes on the arterial. So why did that happen? Well, the feds and the states pay for that capacity increases, right? Historically, the state and federal have paid for those kinds of capacity increases, so local governments didn't have to carry that burden. Contrast that to prior to World War II and more recently, as we've changed these patterns, not only do you have a network of streets that are connected, but you also have a mix of uses, so people don't have to leave their neighborhood to take care of grocery shopping or go to the doctors and those sorts of things, whereas with suburban sprawl, that is always the case. And this is true all over the country, but it's especially true in the Sunbelt states. So if you lived in that subdivision in the back, how long do you think it would take you to get to that movie theater? Probably, it's not going to be a 5-minute drive. And contrast, and likewise, this happens to be in Orange County, outside the city of Orlando, that we had just as many problems within the city. These are two homes that are 70 feet apart, but it's a 7-mile drive to go from door to door. So think about all the delivery services that we have today and what that does to trip making for those delivery services, repairs. In my case, at the city of Orlando, going out to replace signs or adjust signals, it ends up we driving further and having more trips on the arterial system just because there's no connectivity between development patterns. And that is something that the state can't control currently, at least the DOT can't control. That's entirely within the control of local governments. When I lived in Houston, Texas, we were in a brand new subdivision, and right next to our garage, the street was stubbed out to the adjacent property so that when that developer came in, they were going to have to connect to our streets, which means now you have connectivity for automobiles. But I've seen things as small as having a pedestrian connection between neighborhoods. If you're not going to have cars, at least have pedestrian connections. So that if the school's in the adjacent neighborhood, now you don't have to drive out to the arterial. And I mentioned the Davis by Design report. This comes out every 2 years from the Complete Streets Coalition, and this is what got the Secretary's attention and why he brought me back to the state in 2011. As I mentioned, the Sunbelt states are the worst, In Florida, back when the 2011 report came out, 4 of the top 5 most dangerous metropolitan regions in the country were in Florida, and that got his attention in a big way. Unfortunately, we haven't made a whole lot of progress. We now have 8 out of the top 20 metro areas are still in the Florida. And the only reason that we dropped down in this chart is because other regions have moved up, which is not a good way to get there. When I was at the City of Orlando, we brought in a firm to help us do a safety action plan, a Vision Zero safety action plans. One of the first things that was a meaningful effort to deal with the safety issues. And one of the things that they said that we need to do differently, instead of trying to fix the whole state road system, you need to focus on where your biggest problems were. We had 6 commissioner districts at the city, and I told the consultant, I said, I want the top 3 most dangerous segments of roadway within each commissioner's district, so they'll be focused on their district, because one district may contain most of the problems, but I want to make sure that each of them understood they had a responsibility to try to help the city and the state to address these problems. And when we got the results back, these short segments of roadways in each of our commissioner districts accounted for between 28 and 79% of all the fatalities and serious injuries in that commissioner district. So think what would happen with fatality rates if we were to focus on the high injury network instead of trying to fix the entire world. So this was very compelling information to me. I also wanted to do more research into what the actual costs are. We've been using various values for the cost of a fatality over the years. It's up around $12 million now. If you have a serious injury, it's still about $1 million. And these are the kinds of costs that go into those analyses that are done nationally. When we did this study at a planning firm I used to work for, we found that nationally that the average cost for collisions is about $2,000. In Florida, it's $2,800. And I think when we see the billboards around the state, what are they for? They're for trial attorneys to make a lot of money for their clients. And the second thing I wanted to find out is what is really an incapacitating injury? I know what a fatality is, that's pretty straightforward, but what is an incapacitating or serious injury? These are life-changing injuries that affect your quality of life going forward. So we need to be as concerned about those as we are about the fatalities. And so at DOT, we did a lot of things around safety. The Pedestrian and Bicycle Focus Initiative is what the Secretary brought me back to lead in 2011, and then that rolled into the implementation of Complete Streets, which I'll talk about shortly. Thankfully, the feds, the Federal Highway and US DOT got on board after Vision Zero, and they adopted what's called the Safe System approach to transportation safety, which is still focused on many of the same things. And what you're talking about is to try to create redundancy so that if a person makes a mistake, which we all do, that chances are that they won't end up in a serious crash. And when you look at the things along the bottom, the things that we can really, that those in government can really have some control over is the safe speeds and safe roads. We can't control Detroit. We can't control necessarily the care that the medical personnel provide. And we can't control in reality the way drivers behave, and there's a lot of challenges related to that. So what we're doing is we're trying to focus on reducing the speed in those areas where we have a high injury network, so that the chances for, if someone gets hit or if there's a car crash, the chances of a fatality or serious injury are greatly reduced. So some of the things that we're doing more of as a result of that, including at Florida DOT, is separating users in space, so having multi-use trails or cycle tracks like you see here in this city. Separating users in time, that's related to signal timing so that pedestrians are crossing outside of the normal signal cycles. The problem that we have in most of the country, for years we did not allow right turn on reds, we do now, and so many pedestrians are concerned about crossing because of the right turn on red drivers. Even the fire departments, if you pay any attention to fire departments when they're going to an emergency, even though they may have the green at an intersection, they will typically slow down because of right turn on red. Someone will cut them off just as they're approaching the intersection. And then increasing the awareness by using some of the treatments that we'll talk about here as well. We know from the research now, because of what Federal Highway has done, that there are treatments that we can use to help improve safety for all users, not just for pedestrians and bicyclists. And these is just a list of these. All this material is going to be available to all of you who are here. So one of the big challenges that I came across when I became the state roadway design engineer after being with DOT for quite some time is I was questioning the issues around safety. I said, okay, so we're meeting our standards, we're meeting the national standards. Why do we have 40,000 people down on our roads every year if we're meeting these standards? Well, what we found out at a national conference in '96 is that the criteria are not based on safety research, they're based only on maintaining the operating speed and the capacity of the roadway. Even today, you will talk to engineers that say, well, we have to meet the standards because we want to be a safe system, because they don't understand that. So education is critically important for the industry as well as the public. So when you look at these, so normative safety is when the design meets the standards regardless of the actual safety history. Well, if we're having 40,000 people die on our roads every year, there's a problem with the standards, in my view. Substantive safety is when safety actually occurs whether the standards are met or not. So you may have a narrow travel lane, but if you're not having crashes, if that's not on the high entry network, that's what's considered as substantive safety. And then everyone has their perception of perceived safety. Model roundabouts are the most safe traffic control device that we have in our toolbox, but a lot of people have mixed feelings about them, maybe because they came from New England where you have rotaries. That is not the same thing as a model roundabout, and I'll explain why and how they work properly. So look at this image. You can see that, let's say this is a 2 lanes intersecting with 2 lanes, or maybe a circle, and the speeds in the model roundabout should be in the range of 15 to 25 miles an hour. So if you have a crash, the chances of severe injury or fatality are significantly reduced, and that's for everyone, not for pedestrians or bicyclists. And this data changes depending on where you look, but one of the things that I point out, excuse me, in addition to the safety benefits, you have less delay. You don't have all red time where nobody is going through the intersection. Think about how many times you go to an intersection off peak and you're sitting there for 2 and 3 minutes while it's completely gapped out. There's nobody coming. With a model roundabout, the traffic moves constantly unless there's a pedestrian in the crosswalk, and then by Florida law, you're required to stop. The other benefit that we found out, this I learned in the city of Orlando the hard way, we had a tropical storm occur right after I came on board. It shut down our entire signalized intersection. We had somewhere in the range of 600 signals. They were all out due to lack of power. If you have a modern roundabout, guess what? People keep going because they don't have to depend. We had 45 generators, so every other intersection became a 4-way stop, which doesn't work too well in most states. Likewise, we need to educate the drivers, and I won't put you to this test that I've been using for 15 years. I would go into an audience and I'd say, okay, how many of you, except if you had to take a test to get points off your license, have looked at the driver's handbook since you got your learner's permit? 90 to 95%, sometimes 100% of the people have never looked at the driver's handbook since they got their learner's permit, except for the traffic division. Those guys all know the law, but the rest of the police aren't any better. I asked the police department when I was in a meeting with them, I asked them, how many of you have looked at the handbook? Only the traffic division staff raised their hand. None of the others even knew the law. And the laws change every 2 years, so it's a good idea to look. If you don't want to get a ticket, take a look at the handbook so you know what the laws are. And these 2 intersections, so which of these is a legal crosswalk for a pedestrian? They're both legal, whether it's marked or unmarked. Now, would you cross at an unmarked intersection, unmarked crosswalk? If you're a pedestrian, probably not, because people don't know the law. And we have to be a lot more transparent from a transportation standpoint, really for government. You know, we've always talked about our projects in the industry as improvements. These are improvements to your community, but what are the negative unintended consequences? We don't ever talk about those, but many of our citizens have become more educated and they know there's unintended consequences. We need to be transparent about what those are when we talk to the public. Should be a big wake up for a lot of you. When I was the district design engineer back in '93, the secretary came back from the secretary staff meeting, which we do every month, and said, I've got some good news and I've got some shows. The green area above the line is transfers from the general fund, which are not paid for by gas tax, everybody pays into those. Over 275 billion last time I checked have been transferred from general fund, which should not be intended for transportation, into the transportation trust fund to keep it solvent. And if you look at the red line down below, if we hadn't transferred those funds over, that the trust fund would be nearly 600 billion in the hole by 2035.
Billy, can you just take a minute and explain what the trust fund funds?
Yeah, so the highway trust fund, the federal highway trust fund funds capacity. It does not pay for operations. So the state pays for all the operations and maintenance on the state system. The feds fund capacity. In other words, adding lanes or adding capacity to the roadway system. And that's what it does. So when you look at funding overall, you can see, kind of see how things are working. So when I went to a meeting with the secretary probably 3 or 4 years ago, he said, you know, things have not changed at the federal level. They're still having to transfer money from general fund into the highway trust fund. The other problem is that the state gas tax, which is indexed to inflation because of electronic vehicles and people working from home and things like that, were expected to plateau last year. That has been extended out a couple of years, but once that happens, unless the state gas taxes increase, then you'll start to see the same line happening at the state level. It will start to go down just like the federal gas tax. At the local level, it's tough because that's controlled by the Florida legislature. That fund has not allowed local governments to increase their gas tax, and so it's been the same since 1993, so we're talking over 30 years ago. It's not indexed to inflation. You can see what the tax is. Impact fees, which local governments collect for new development, have to be spent on capacity. So the only way the local government can pay for maintenance is either out of their general fund or to pursue a transportation sales tax. Very few counties in the state, and that's where it has to happen at the county level, very few counties in the state have taken that opportunity.
Can I ask a question? So the impact fees, it's only based on capacity. Does that mean it cannot be spent on bike paths or LSD paths or wider sidewalks?
That's a good question. My understanding is no, but I think some of those improvements can be paid for by impact fees because they would be putting sidewalks in this type of road. Right? So those things are normally included, yes.
Increases.
Yeah, bike box maybe not, but yes, sidewalks and multi-use paths. So where do we go from here? I've shared a lot of information that's probably difficult for some of you to process. So this statement, which I'll always love, the solution of the traffic problem is to be sought not so much by wider streets as by the proper plan of the town. So the land development patterns have everything to do with how all of this works or doesn't work.
Who's John Nolan?
John Nolan, 1926. So, and so they had traffic problems back then, nothing like what we have today, but it's all relative, right? So where do we go from here? What I brought back to the state DOT and to the secretary, I told him, I said, in 2014, I said, Anath, or actually it was Jim Boxall by then, I said, Jim, we can't keep designing our streets the way we've been doing for the last several decades and expect the safety problems to get any better, and he agreed with me. So we were fortunate enough to get support from the Complete Streets Coalition and the State Roadway Design Office to implement Complete Streets on the state road system. And part of what that did is take an approach of we've got to work with local governments to integrate land use and transportation. Before that, DOT said, well, we can't do anything, so we're not going to do anything. So this was a major shift in the department. So I made 150 presentations during my 5 years to local governments, the NPOs, anyone that wanted to talk. I came in and educated them on where the department was going from a safety standpoint, but also from an implementation of Complete Streets. So we've got to integrate land use and transportation. We need more connectivity between adjacent developments, develop more street network through smaller block size, and then use the flexibility that we've had for decades in based on context, and now other states and AASHTO are moving in that direction. They're following Florida's lead. And then use speed management techniques on the high entry network, which is a huge challenge. So in 2014, Dwayne Carver and I wrote the policy. The Complete Streets Coalition said, this is all the stuff you need to fix. And then the State Roadway Design Office, with the support of a consulting firm, we implemented that in 2 years into the Florida Design Manual. So you've heard the word transect used yesterday, if you were here. I'm going to give you why we taught this context class instead. The transect does not address suburban sprawl. And guess what? We have a lot of suburban sprawl in Florida. We knew we had to address that. So we talked internally, we said, we're gonna take the T3 classification, the transect zone 3, and use that for suburban sprawl. So you see C3R and C3C. C3R is residential suburban sprawl. C3C is commercial suburban sprawl, because these are single-use types of development patterns. A subdivision that's nothing but homes, this would be C3C. So below that, you have C1, C2, and C2T. C1 is rural, C2 is agriculture. We knew from an NCHRP report that small towns don't like to be called urban, so we came up with C22, which is rural towns, like places like out in the middle of the state, which we have a lot of still. And then on the upside, which is the area that most of this work is focused on, is C4, 5, and 6. So the more urban places is where most of what I'm discussing comes into play on the existing system. And then we just have some illustrations here that I use to tell the engineers, this is what these look like, generally speaking, just as an introduction to all of this. So what changed at DOT? Before we implemented Complete Streets, engineers had one choice, 12-foot lanes, and if you didn't use a 12-foot lane, you had to justify it in writing, and I had to sign it at the district, and I had to sign it at the state roadway design level. You had a choice between a 5-foot sidewalk or a 6-foot sidewalk. If it's at the back of curb, it's 6 feet. If it's got grass between that and the curb, it's 5. The minimum design speed was 40, regardless of context. And on the strategic intermodal system, which you have out here on State Road 50, the minimum design speed was 50. They have fixed that since then, thank goodness. Now they do it based on context, not based on the fact that it's on the SIS. And then afterwards, you could have a 10, 11, or 12-foot lane based on context, 5, 6, 10, and 12-foot sidewalks based on context, and then the target speed as low as 25. Many engineers used to, when they were told that they needed to design a roadway for 45 miles an hour, they design it for 50 or 55 because they believed that would make it safer. Remember that statement from AASHTO at the beginning. After I left, I was thrilled to see that the department is still working on this. So they came up with a chapter called Speed Management, and all of these are tools that the state will now allow on the system to help with speed management. Almost none of these tools were allowed previous to this work, including on-street parking. We used to remove on-street parking to add more lanes, and now that's no longer done, or shouldn't be. And likewise, they allow treatments like raised intersections, again, to help reduce speeds in areas where you have very high pedestrian activity. These are things that were not allowed to be used on the state system previously. So what can local government do to help transportation with these issues? So you've seen the 5-minute walk on the illustration last night if you were here. And what we need is we need more network. And we need blocks to be walkable, and we need to connect those streets so that there's lots of ways to get around. When I was in District 1, we had a major crash at an intersection to what I would call a cul-de-sac neighborhood. There was only one way in and one way out, and there was a medical emergency while that was happening. They had to bring a helicopter in to clean that person out. I think it was a heart attack because they could not get through the intersection because it was blocked. And then local government needs to provide micro-communities where you have a mix of uses, you have a network of streets, you have parks and open spaces, and neighborhood-oriented retail. So a good example that's not a long drive from here is Baldwin Park. I won't say that it's perfect, but it's the best example I'm aware of in Central Florida that's easy to get to. and you can see all of these treatments incorporated into Baldwin Park. You could live there literally and not have to leave because you have hospitals, you have schools from preschool through high school, and you have retail and all the things. There are no signals in Baldwin Park except at the elementary school because there's so many ways to get in and out, you don't have a congestion problem. And that's because there's 32 connections to the existing street network. This is an infill project that used to be the Naval Training Center. So one project I worked on with for the DOT District 5, they approached me after I became the transportation director at the city of Orlando because I've been in District 5, they knew me well, and they said, Billy, we've got problems on Robinson Street. We have problems with the buses. These are 4 9-foot lanes, literally 9-foot lanes, curb face to curb face. And because so many people come to Lake Eola in downtown, they park in the neighborhoods on the right, and then they cross Robinson Street to get to the parks. And they're having, based on the volumes on Robinson Street, they were having an unusually high number of crashes. So we brought a consulting firm on board and worked with the district, and my understanding is this should be going to construction fairly soon. So Robinson Street will be road dilated down to 3 lanes with islands for pedestrian crossings and a cycle track adjacent to the park, which is going to dramatically reduce the number of crashes with pedestrians on this roadway. So that's supposed to be construction. And I worked on a project south of Tallahassee called Woodville Highway. And on this highway is an elementary school. It's one of the older elementary schools, and the front walkway is only about 60 feet from the edge of pavement. And the crossing guards there told me that until they get out into the middle of the road, people continue to pass them so that they don't have a delay going to work in Tallahassee from down at the coast. And so as part of that presentation, I said, listen, you just allowed the dollar store to be built with a parking lot and a detention pond in front of your building. That is not going to help your situation. So yes, sidewalks will help. They had none. And obviously having a crosswalk that's contrasting helps to improve the visibility, but it's not going to reduce the speeds of the traveling public. Trees will help with shade, and that may have some impact on some people. But keep in mind, people drive this road every day to work year-round. So they drive as fast as they feel comfortable based on the existing traffic conditions. I said what you really have to do if you want to reduce the speed through the heart of your downtown is to change your land development pattern so you bring buildings up to the back of sidewalk and install on-street parking, which is one of the most effective tools for reducing speeding because people will slow down to park and they'll be concerned about cars opening their doors as they travel by. I said this way you can realistically get the speeds through the heart of your city down to 25 miles an hour. Otherwise, you're going to continue to have the same issues and concerns. And so the outcome of that is you end up with places to meet up, buildings at the sidewalk with on-street parking. If the parking is not used because you have surface parking, it's not going to get you the same result. You've got to have active on-street parking. And ideally, parking that turns over so that it either has time limits or is metered, because then you get the activity. If people are parked there all day long, people driving through are going to figure that out, right? And say, well, nobody ever changes, nobody ever comes in and out of these spaces after 8 a.m. until 5. So those are things you just need to be aware of. And then having neighborhood parks so that people have a place to go and making it safe for everyone. This is Vancouver. When I was there for a conference, I saw this gentleman riding his son to school, and because the speeds were so low and because the behavior of drivers in Vancouver is such they expect cyclists, that he felt safe with his child going to work, going to school with him. And if we want transit to work, we really have to have compact development patterns. We funded Sunrail and we funded the circulator in downtown Orlando. Those are big operational costs that you get no money from the feds or from the state fund. Locals have to pay the entire cost of that. So you've got to have compact development patterns if you want transit to work in a meaningful way. And with that, that's the overview that I was asked to prepare today. So we've got time now for questions or discussion. Yes, sir.
Mr. Bill Holloway, finally
Holloway.
put
Just call me Billy.
Billy. It's nice to put the face. I'm actually on the NPO committee as an advisory. We finally got to put the face to the voice You brought up, the presentation was awesome, but there was a few concerns I had. When it comes to your sidewalks, okay, enforcement. I live along Hartwood Marsh, okay? Every day since I moved there, since 2016, okay, people are walking on the grass. I brought this to the city. The city turns around and tells me it's a county road. I bring it to the county road, Lake County that is, okay? And they tell me, well, we're gonna build a road. We're gonna expand it. And you gotta wait, because no sense of putting in sidewalks now. All right, 8 years later, they finally took a vote to expand Hartwood Marsh. Okay? These people are still walking. I'm talking about that picture you showed with the lady with the stroller. I have people walking, and believe me, I don't know who's responsible to cut that grass, but they're walking in 8 inches of grass with a stroller, just to get the Publix, because we don't have sidewalks.
Right.
See, nobody wants the responsibility to spend the money for it. It's not the city's fault. We don't own those roads. But we are tired of listening to the county say, well, we put the road in. Honestly, the road should have been started already, according to Mr. Earhart. But now he also gave him a backbone of also staying, well, up to May. Could go from anywhere from end of February to May. Okay? You want my opinion? It ain't gonna be started till next year, because this was funded in 2007. That's with the sidewalks. The speed limit, I love that idea. But the problem is, who's gonna enforce it? All right, I can tell you right now, I'm from New York, all right, as you can tell by the accent. All right, I thought they drove crazy until I came down here to Florida. It's not the Floridians, it's everybody coming down. You know the old saying, what flows downhill, okay? And just this morning, just going to Publix, I almost got hit because they just fly through a stop sign without even looking. Okay, so that's the enforcement part. Connectivity of communities. I do understand your idea, but the private communities, the roads are narrower. Really, you hit the nail on the head. 12-foot lanes. That's why we're talking about curb to curb is 24 feet. We're not talking about that little swale that's in there for the water too. So technically, you're looking at 10 feet. So when you want to go through these neighborhoods, all right, you got kids playing in the street, you got narrow roads, that's something that you might want to look into, okay? The right on red. There's pros and cons on the right on red. Okay, you know that. Right on red helps flow, perfect example, and I hate using Hartwood Marsh, but if you didn't have a right on red in Hartwood Marsh, that'd be backed up all the way to Heritage Hills again.
Understood.
Okay, Bill, you know what I'm talking about. You heard me complain about this at the MPO.
Location-based.
Exactly. The roundabouts. Not only do I live in New York, I live in New Jersey. I hate roundabouts.
Those are rotaries.
Oh, those are rotaries?
They're not the same thing.
Okay, what do you consider
So
along Hartwood Marsh,
Yeah.
or Orange County on Marsh Road?
I'm not familiar with the
Okay,
location.
they have a total of 3 roundabouts. You are right when it comes to the fatal accidents. You're 100% right, because people slow down.
Yep.
But it's confusing for the novice driver, when do I go, when do I don't go? And then they get distracted by the guy behind them saying you gotta move. Okay, roundabouts I'm not a fan of, all right? The gas tax. This is what I want to touch base with you, Billy. Look around, how many Teslas, how many EV cars that you see. Okay, I own a gas guzzler, okay? I'm paying tax, I don't mind paying tax. What are we doing for the EV cars? How do they donate towards the gas tax? That's my question to you.
Yeah, there's legislation looking at charging EVs a fee at some point in time. But keep in mind, the federal gas tax is not funded purely by gas. It's also funded by general fund. Going back to law enforcement, when I was at the city of Orlando, I went to the chief and I said, how many motor division guys do you have? He said, we used to have 24. Because of complaints from citizens, they cut that back to 12. By the time I left, they had 7 because they had to put them in as school resource officers. They have to cover Orlando 27 or 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They have to respond to crashes. They have to respond to dignitaries coming in from the airport and all that sort of thing. So enforcement is a challenge. Automated enforcement is helpful and it can be managed in a way that's not punitive, because I had to manage the red light camera program in Orlando. And then the other issue about sidewalks. The state requires sidewalks to be put on the state system when it's widened or built new. In fact, we switched from putting, in my district, we switched from, in the rural conditions where we knew development was coming, we switched from putting in just sidewalks and bike lanes to putting in multi-use paths on both sides. Because most bicyclists are not gonna ride in a bike lane. I'm one of those road bike riders that does, but most people are not comfortable doing that. And getting back to the modern roundabouts, I've heard this 1,000 times in District 1 when I was the secretary. So this is the way I explain using a modern roundabout. First of all, when you're approaching a modern roundabout, what does the sign say? It says yield. What does yield mean? It means if nobody's coming, you can go. And people who run stop signs all the time, will stop at a yield sign, which drives me to distraction. So what I tell people, I said, if you were pulling out of a driveway onto a one-way street, what would you do? You'd look left and nobody's coming, you'd go. I'd say, now you know how to drive a model roundabout. Then I would ask the audience, I'd say, how many of you take a different route from your home when you go shopping or school or whatever? Nobody raises their hand. So then I'd say, how many times do you think it'll take for you to figure out how to drive a model roundabout? And then sheepishly, they'll say 2 or 3 times. Then the other issue comes with 2 lanes. Well, 2 roundabouts are even worse. We don't know how to drive those. Anybody familiar with the Villages?
Yes.
That's a private development, operated and maintained by the private developer. They have, last time I checked, they had over 30 2-lane roundabouts. Do you think that guy would still be building it if it was a problem?
No, I understand that,
Okay.
but see, when you said on the speed limit, okay, and that's what the roundabouts do, all right? But the enforcement, being from New York, before I left, they just started imposing all schools, like we're finally doing 20 miles an hour, all right? But you know what? They enforced it the right way. Anybody goes by, they know for a fact, oh, this is school zone, they'll try to avoid it, all right? I have a school right in front of my community. I can't tell you, if that police officer wasn't there, they'd be flying through, all right? But people don't understand that, okay? But it's not the people, it's the enforcement. That's all I'm trying to say. And enforcement falls under infrastructure, okay? And we're growing so fast, our police department, it can't keep up with it.
Exactly.
All right, and that's where the problem is going to happen in Clermont.
Yeah. Well, I would say that driver behavior is a bigger problem than lack of enforcement, because by law, we're required to behave a certain way, and if you don't, you should be pulled, and that's why automated enforcement will help to address that in time.
Thank you, Bill.
We because we had so few officers, and they get a lot of complaints about speeding in neighborhoods, so we used our red light camera funds to buy 14 speed feedback trailers. So when the citizen called the commissioner, we would put the speed feedback trailers out there. They could collect data 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if we found there was a legitimate speeding problem, what time of day it was and what day of the week, then we could send law enforcement out to deal with it. Otherwise, they didn't have to deal with it. So we
Honestly,
were
Billy,
impacting
with this,
we were
with radar
doing-
you're talking about, people actually try to beat their top score. Just, all right, and I'm being honest. I
Yeah,
mean,
we
this is
can't
reality,
control
I'm
that
being honest.
behavior, so these other 2 people have a
Like,
question.
Let's move on to other questions.
yes, so I get the idea of the connectivity, I love that. How do you address that concern of it creating more neighborhood traffic? Because that's the one thing I do hear when I talk about that, so how do you all address that? Is that a reality? Is it gonna increase neighborhood traffic? Is that one of the unintended consequences?
You mean in terms of having more network?
And when you talk about connecting the different subdivisions,
connecting
keeping people
neighborhoods.
off the main corridors, how does that impact traffic in
Well,
neighborhoods? That's a concern.
if both neighborhoods have a gridded network of streets, you're gonna have traffic regardless, because people have more ways to get around. I mean, the connectivity is more from neighborhood to neighborhood movement.
So, you know, one
because that is something that I hear a lot of people are concerned about, neighborhood traffic, people cutting through neighborhoods. So perhaps if there is going to be an increase in traffic in those neighborhoods, we should focus on the benefits of added safety. I think people are very concerned about A, cars flying down their local streets, and also B, emergency services not being able to get there with the current, we cannot really call it a network, currently, I think. So this is something that we should emphasize. We can manage the speed of cars through good design, A, and with increased connectivity, there will be a better response by emergency services. So yes, there might be an increase in traffic, but it will be slow traffic, A, and you will have better response from emergency services. So that would be kind of like my add-on to your point, because I have heard the same concern as well.
If I may piggyback on that, all communities that are gated have an egress exit, and it's mandatory to have an emergency response system regardless if it's in and out. So that will not slow down the response time getting in or through a community. Emergency vehicles can go and cut through Kingsbridge if there is an accident, all right? I was aware of that because I was an HOA president and we had to install it, all right? We have one at the front gate and one at the back gate. Either they use their siren and they can cut through the neighborhoods. So for emergency vehicles, that's good. But, I mean, honestly, people move to Florida. I came here because I wanted a gated community. I didn't want cars passing through my house on a daily basis. I left New York for that. That's why we came here.
Then I hope you're not complaining about how slow traffic is on 50.
Oh, listen, listen. You know, I could debate with you all day on this, but I don't want to waste everybody else's time.
Good idea.
If I may,
Yeah,
if I may ask the question, just real quick, the question is actually for you. This was a great presentation, especially on the speed. I do have a question regarding what means the target speed versus the
design
speed, because I saw that on that
Right.
context system, and I saw that the minimum speed was 25 for the lowest road, but the target speed was 35, and I'm a little confused because at 30 we have a 50% chance of
Sure.
death.
So the reason we came up with the term target speed is because we're trying to change the culture of the engineering community. And we want to use a term that tell the engineers, this is what we want you to use. We don't want you adding any 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour. We want this to be the target speed for any given design going forward. The term design speed is still out there, it's used interchangeably, but when you're doing the design, you should be using the target speed for the street.
Follow-up question, if I may, sorry.
Sure.
Just real quick. Why are they not the same, though, if it's just to educate the
It
engineers?
depends on the context.
No, I'm talking about the same context. I think it was like C6, that is the urban or reverse?
Which you must be looking at.
C1?
No, yours
Was
is
urban.
C2.
Thank you. Like, yeah, if you could pull up the,
This one
okay,
right here.
so we have C6.
No,
No,
it's on the map that was easier for.
C6 would be your most urban
That's
road.
the higher.
Correct.
Like, so I see there minimum design speed is gonna be 25, then we have a target speed of 30 and 25. Why is there a 30 or
It has to do with where the treatments are allowed. So if you go across and look at the treatments, so for example, a raised intersection can't be used on 30-mile-an-hour target speed, it can only be used on 25.
So it's to give engineers some flexibility?
Correct. So
Okay.
they have some guidance on what tools can be used and what conditions.
Okay.
So Billy, let me put a,
Before you go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I just, I drive to Windermere every day because my son goes to school in Windermere, from here. So I drive through Hamlet and I drive through Winter Gardens and I guess what do you call, Winter Summerlin. So the connectivity, it looks like there's urbanism happening there because the connectivity, there's no gates, and I drive through all these neighborhoods. But the problem that I'm seeing, and I've been doing this for the last 4 years and I've lived here, is the placement of the cars when they're in the streets, because it seems like the streets are so, they're smaller.
They're narrow.
They're narrow, right. So I just, if that's gonna happen here, we might have to be implementing not only the way that we drive through, but also people should be parking on one side of the street, because trying to maneuver sometimes through these streets, through Summer Lake or even through, I forgot the other neighborhood, I mean, it's like a maze.
Yeah, those are called yield streets, and those are recommended in some places. They're good in suburban or in a very urban residential neighborhood. I live in South Tampa now, but I lived in downtown Orlando, both in historic neighborhoods. All of our streets are yield streets, because back then they weren't designed to have 2 lanes and have parking on both sides. So people, the residents basically learn to park in a way that so cars and trucks can still navigate through.
And they're
But
not
that's a
intended to-
speed management tool.
Yeah, they're not intended to be long distance.
Or
But
high
they
speed.
are, that's the thing. I
Or
mean,
high speed.
You're growing. I mean, from Hamlin to Windermere, everybody's taking those streets through Summer Lake, and then I forgot the other Summerport. That's it, Summerport. Summerport is traffic. I mean, a lot of traffic, and they have centers of intertown, they were in town center, so, you know, I'm trying to figure out the connectivity, and I get it, because I drive through it every day, but I'm just, you know, there's times where I got stuck because there was a truck, a garbage truck that couldn't get through because there was a car on one side and then a car that kind of went parked here, and so he was trying to figure out how to get through.
Sure.
So that's the only word that
It's
I've
probably
experienced.
because they're historic streets and can't be wide.
These are new streets.
Oh, new streets, I have to go look at that.
Summerport.
I wonder if we can, this is a little bit far afield, but whether we might spend a few minutes hearing about the resurfacing for 50 without getting into great details about it, but just so that people understand that that's out there.
Yeah, so there's a plan to resurface State Road 50 through the city of Clermont. The approval for,
West of 27.
I'm sorry?
West of 27.
Thank you. Oh, west of 27. From west of 27 to
12th Street?
is it 12th Street.
Blocks under 12.
Thank you for the limits. So those are the limits of the resurfacing. And we've seen the plans that the district has proposed, the concept plans. It will go into design later this year. It's not expected to go to construction until 2029. So it's in the last year of our current 5-year program. And so one of the things we're suggesting to the city is that the city work with District 5 to try to incorporate things that the city may want to improve in terms of intersection treatments and that sort of thing. So I've shared that with the city staff, and I've reached out to the Director of Transportation Development in District 5, because I've known him for a long time, and he's willing to meet with the city to talk about the ideas that the city has coming forward. When we did the Robinson Street in conjunction with the district, the mayor wanted us to incorporate treatments that the parks were going to be incorporating into the park fair. And we also wanted landscaping, which the city would have to pay for in Orlando, and for some of the other treatments. So we needed another year or so to get that funding together, so the district actually moved that resurfacing project out a year or two. And then we also wanted to underground the utilities, and Orlando Utilities does not operate by the city. They just write a check. And so they wanted more time to underground the utilities because it's a non-revenue producing construction project. In other words, they don't get any money for that. And so the district did move that again. They actually had to do some interim treatments to maintain the pavement until they go to the final resurfacing, which I think is supposed to happen in a year or so. So that's something that we're planning on having discussions with the district.
Billy, I just want to reinforce your idea of bringing up the context-sensitive design.
Context-based.
Context-based with the transect and understanding that, especially the new neighborhoods. So what that is countering, I think many of us have been on these roads that are posted at 55 miles an hour, and it's the same design, and all of a sudden it drops to 40 miles an hour, and then it's the same roadway section, and all of a sudden it's posted at 30. And then on the other side of town, it goes back up. The physical form never changed, but the speeds are lower, and that's where we get caught. People call them speed traps. That's where they're high accident injury areas. There's an inconsistency with the intent of the road design and the built environment and the user, the way people use it. We will all drive the speed that we feel comfortable. Using the context, understanding the land use around it, results in different roadway sections so that the speed that you want to achieve is not what's in the textbook of table, and it's not just what's posted on the street. It actually brings the two together, so at the end of the day, you don't look at the signs, you are naturally driving at that speed. That adds a more variety in the street types that you would have in a plan in new developments that are being built. So that's a major shift that the state of Florida is leading on, that Billy's really led on, that ties into the land use planning that Liz and Marina shared last night on the zone.
Yeah, this goes back to what's called driver expectation in our practice. And one of the things we've done a lousy job of for over 50 years, which I've been doing this business, is driver expectation. We have not been designing the roadways. And when you read up on driver expectation, it basically says this is what we should be designing in the way so that drivers know how fast they should be driving based on the context. And we have basically ignored that theory as part of our engineering for decades. Yes, sir.
So Clermont has had some safer street designs that we've looked at going back probably 10 years. The problem with them is that they're cost prohibitive. So do you have strategies that can help the city figure out the best way to do that? Because looking at those designs, they make sense, they look great, there's a lot of bonuses to them.
Sure.
But I can tell you that even before I was on council, the city looked at it and it was cost prohibitive. There was no way to get from point A to point B, especially for, it's a road that has 2 schools on it. It's heavily traveled at certain times.
Right.
Definitely needs some sector separation.
Yeah.
But the costs are just prohibitive. Especially when Clermont was smaller. Maybe it's a little easier now, but you definitely need some strategies to be able to get there to fund those things.
Well,
To be specific, right?
that's what the speed management chapter helps, because prior to 10 years ago, we did not have these tools. I mean, there are some of us that knew about them, were already applying them, but they were not wholesale in the industry. There's lots of treatments that can be done. There's some things called tactical urbanism, where you can use temporary treatments like flexible posts and things of that nature. And raised crosswalks. I didn't talk about Orange Blossom Trail in Orlando. So Orange Blossom Trail was on our high entry network. And the state knew that a lot of people were being killed on that roadway. A lot of pedestrians are being killed. And so, and again, it's because people have to get across the road and people are driving on Orange Blossom Trail, which is a 6-lane highway. The speed limits were 45 miles an hour, but we know during off-peaks people are driving probably 60. And so they realize they have to, in those cases, you have to use more aggressive treatments than you would if you had a street in the land development patterns that support lower speeds. So they put in raised crosswalks, I think 6 raised crosswalks, and they put in what's called a hawk. I think Liz showed that last night. So when a pedestrian activates the hawk, it goes to red, and between the raised crosswalks and the hawks, and then fencing the median, okay, up to the crosswalks, they went from having like a pedestrian getting hit every month to no fatalities for over 2 years before they had another fatality, and before they were having them regularly.
I mean, just to add to that, we're going to try to be more prescriptive in terms of the comprehensive plan to say where can you have the greatest impact, as Billy was mentioning. So where you're going to have new town centers is really where you're going to maybe want to really think about redesigning the streets or the state roads at those locations. Where Anna was mentioning, for example, those streets that it uses cut through like Lakeshore Drive, that people take Lakeshore Drive all the way to avoid using 27. It may be thinking about, somebody's secret road, but it's not so secretive to so many other people. So that may be an example of money well spent to try to put in some additional safety measures there as well. So to be very prescriptive about where that happens.
So that is one of the roads that's actually on the plan, city plan to have redone. Lakeshore is. And so I had, when I was on council, had conversations with road so that they could possibly add a little bit of sector separation. Because we do have a lot of walkers. I live over there. So there's a lot of walkers, a lot of bicycles, a lot of that type of thing. So, if they can get the right of way, they can do that. But East Avenue is another one. So that was the roads that I'm specifically talking about, roads that we have to redo. Most likely a complete rebuild. That being one of them is a complete rebuild. It's not a resurface. The base has gone bad. So, You know, it's the opportunity, it's the right opportunity to do it, but the city needs the strategies to be able to get there to do it and to make it affordable, because
I'll give you another example. The city of Kissimmee had problems with speeding in downtown, so they put in temporary speed tables. You can buy these things, they're not expensive. They put them down as a pilot to see how things are gonna work out. They left them in place, they ended up working out fine, so they made permanent speed tables. So that way you can work with locations, you can move the temporary ones and find out where the best place is so that you get the speeds that you're looking for.
yeah, I'm just looking at redesign. If you're redesigning the road and you
That's
make it a
much
safe
more
road, you're
expensive.
already there, but you
Right.
just have to find a way to do it at a
Right.
reasonable price.
But you've gotta have adjacent land use that supports those
It-
behaviors, right?
It might be useful to, for you to
I see what you're-
describe this history to Billy after this session so that we can be specific about it. And then Laurie, you've already been talking about some things that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're already on our future plans, and they are already funded. Both of these are already in the funding process, so it's just, if you guys are able to help us do that as a city, then it's better for us.
This gentleman back here with the hat's been very.
I was just gonna say about what, the thing you were talking about, the temporary speed tables. I live in a community that is, literally just outside of Clermont lines, and when they finished the community, they connected it to 3 other communities. And it was the only other road out, and we started having extreme problems, speeding, all the things that people talk about on street parking.
That's when you
And
get
that's
the
what
credit.
that's what they had to do. They put in the temporary tables that they could move. They put in a few rumble strips. They put in like 6 extra stop signs. Some of those had effect. And then they had a very, very heavy police presence for like 2-3 months of the road.
Yeah, stop
Like
signs
100
don't,
tickets.
stop signs don't help a whole lot with
Yeah.
speed management.
And then
People
it
just
finally
speed
kind of
too
like,
much.
some came, oh, we can't just do 90 on this one road that goes to this community. So it did work, but it took a little bit of time.
Sure. John?
So there are numerous cities and counties in Florida that are embracing mobility fees with a third-party traffic study, not a trip report, but a third-party traffic study. So when developer John wants to come down and put up 1,000 homes, and I've spoken to the county of Highlands County. So when you go into Highlands County and you want to put up 1,000 home HOA or 7-Eleven or whatever, they hit you 3 different ways. One, you have to apply to have your plan reviewed. So there's a fee there as a developer. The second fee, Highlands County assigns a third-party traffic study company that now Highlands County can say, we're gonna take a 1-mile radius up to a 5-mile radius of your project.
Based on the impacts and.
Based on the impact.
Yeah.
When that study comes back, and they decide that there are roads, bridges, sidewalks, curbs that have to go in, it's just given to the developer and say, have at it, before you put a shovel in the ground. On top of that, let's just say that cost of the developer to improve the infrastructure around their development is $10 million. I'm from New York too, pardon the accent. Highlands County reserves the right to hit you with 10%, $1 million, that they're gonna put in an interest-bearing account, so that 5 years from now, when that bridge that you built or the overpass that you built needs a repair, you're paying for it. So one of the ways where, you know, if, and it's just an opinion, if you embrace that, at the very least, even if you get a lot of pushback from the developer, you do 2 things. You bring them to the table and you start negotiating. Highlands County also uses sureties in their comp plan. Now, the one lady who made this work incredibly is the mayor of the city of Oviedo, Mayor Sladek. She has an incredible comp plan, sureties, and mobility fees. And she told me, I'm not here to hold the developer hostage, but I might tell developer John, instead of 1,000 homes, you're getting 650. Okay? Now, And on top of that, I realize that there are pre-plat conditions, and but I think, and we spoke about this, the one thing that scares everybody is SB 180, 840, because there's that gray area about building of this unburdensome demand from a county. But there are ways to circumvent this, or at least get a developer to the table to say, listen, you just can't have 1,000 homes.
And likewise, you have the transportation sales tax, which Orange County and Hillsborough County's passed, and then they were sued. So the transportation sales tax is an effective tool, and then it can be used throughout the entire region.
But you're bringing up the relationship of the city and the county on the utilities that the city provides.
So interesting that you say that. Sladek has an incredible relationship, not just with the city of Oviedo, but she's reached out to Seminole County. So if there is a project that involves a county road in Seminole County but let's say it's covered by the city of Oviedo, they both make out. So she's already got buy-in, not only from the city level, but from the county level, that it's like, yeah, tell John only 650 homes.
So I don't know if it's worth discussing this a little bit further with regard to the utility, the Clermont utility provision being able to pressure the development that's happening in the county that's going to be served by the city. We spent some time.
Well, I think somebody mentioned yesterday how our JRA with Lake County is a joke, so.
We know that, heard that loud and clear.
So one thing that I do want to make the audience aware of, because during my time at the city of Orlando, and I lived downtown, so I was there for 14 years. I was there for over 9 years before I joined the city. And one of the things I found out shortly after I'd been there is I had to go to a public meeting down in Lake Nona, which is incorporated into the city by the city. And I'd gone to 2 meetings prior to that, and so I go to this meeting with Commissioner Gray, and there's a large audience, more than this, and they're complaining about speeding in the neighborhood, a lot of which was driven by the fact that they weren't fully developed yet. But the other thing I found out when I came out of Lake Nona to get on the roadway to go back to downtown, it said Orlando 25 miles. I was stunned. I went to our CFO and I said, Brian, I said, before we annexed Lake Nona into the city, did we identify what the long-term operational costs are going to be? I know we'll get a lot of money from impact fees, but those can't be used for operations and maintenance. We didn't even have a facility in Lake Nona where the public services side, the public works and traffic engineering, they didn't even set aside space for us to have a facility in Lake Nona. So my traffic engineers are having to drive 25 miles if there's a signal out in Lake Nona, and we get no money, long-term operation costs. We don't get a nickel of long-term operation costs. So why did we ever annex that into the city? As a city taxpayer, I was not happy, and I left within a year after I found that out. And that's pervasive. It's true throughout the state. So you need to be careful about annexations. I think Joe Minicosi is going to talk about that sometime during this arrest, as he hides behind.
Tomorrow afternoon. You can raise your hand, Joe.
And thankfully, I heard Joe shortly after I found this out. I saw Joe speak, and I thought, I'm done with the city. I'm out of here.
That's what's gonna happen here.
Other questions? And feel free to come by and chat with me. I'm more than happy to spend time.
You know, the questions seem to devolve to be telling us about the things we don't work, which is important to know. But,
Yeah.
you know, I wonder whether we might not think for a few minutes about things that do work or things that you have imagined could work better if you did this. And so I guess constructive suggestions, which I'm sure you have as you're moving around and thinking about it.
I can give you some examples. There's some really kind of old roads that are not very wide resurfacing and all this stuff doesn't actually fix problems, it frequently makes problems worse, because you feel safer and not drive faster because it's safer.
Like if I may add to that, actually, like, we have the road on East Avenue, like, into school, it is not a safe road, in my opinion,
It's too
especially it's too wide. But one of the reasons perhaps people don't speed there as much as they could is because, it is in bad shape, so actually the potholes probably slow people down a little bit. Which is, so, but if that road were to be just resurfaced and fixed, then without any design changes, we would see like a lot more speeding there. But to my point, like, this is kind of centered towards school. This is not something that is working well right now. It's something that I would like to see in the future, and just perhaps be incorporated into the code, into the comp plan. I think with transportation projects, they are extremely expensive. They also take a lot of time from staff, from residents. So it would be nice if we could just admit that we cannot have it all, and instead if we could prioritize what the things we're going to focus on. It could be like walkability, bikeability, golf carts. In some cases, it's going to be cars. This is going to be context dependent on the area of Clermont. If I had a magic wand, I would focus on safer routes to school. Back in the 60s, 50% of children walked and bike to school, as many of you know. Now it's just 15%, and that is not good for the children because they're just not active work before arriving to school. Children who actually walk and bike to school arrive there, we're ready to learn. They perform better academically. They have lesser rates of depression, of anxiety, and things like that. But also, I have yet to hear the parent who really likes to drive their kids to school. I have yet to hear. So I think if we could build a Clermont where the area around the school is safe enough for even a 10-year-old to just walk and bike there, like that would be good for the kids, would be good for the parents, would be good for the driver. Like, I would love if we could focus on that in the comp plan.
And getting back to Leonard, school size has a role in that.
Yes.
When I was in elementary school, there were around 150 to 200. Orange County Schools, one that I picked up on that is built is over 800 students in elementary school.
But I live in a community designed by DPZ, and there are kids that are bused to the school, and there's many kids that walk because the streets are narrow enough to allow it. So often people think it's not possible to do, but it absolutely is possible to do. And by the way, and I know that this sounds a little far-fetched, but the mayor of Paris, who has been greening the streets in Paris, did exactly that. She prioritized the streets to the schools and made them very pedestrian friendly and very bike friendly. And so being strategic about that in our greenway plan, as we were just talking right now, is one way to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Other positive things. We'll start here.
I just had a quick question about execution. A lot of performance codes use like road types and then they prescribe them to each transect. Is that the intention, or is it less specific than that, more of a broad intention?
Well, first of all, I think we're building broad intentions, and then we hope to get specific about some locations or measures.
But you would eventually like to tie it to the same transect model that's going to be applied to the code.
So one of the opportunities that I think that is out there is more of the speed tables, the raised crosswalks. We do have a lot of, so in a previous life as a chiropractor, so I made lots of money off of car crashes. Car crashes happen because there's stop signs and there's stoplights. That's the great thing. I know people hate roundabouts, but roundabouts are fantastic because it reduces that stopping. There are less accidents from that standpoint. They're just a safer street, and that comes from somebody who made a living doing that. So every time I see that, and this city has historically, hey, we have a problem here, let's put a stop sign there. So I think that's something, if you guys can bring that, where we have those raised crosswalks, especially at schools, it will, obviously modulate the traffic, even when the kids aren't there, when they're going to the playground, doing whatever, there's not that around, and I think that would help.
And speed tables are much more acceptable than speed bumps, especially to fire departments. You don't like speed bumps.
Bill, honestly, like I said, I lived years with roundabouts, but honestly, okay, roads. But I will tell you, you are correct. A good example is Marsh Road. All right, they actually, the council, put more roundabouts to slow traffic down, and it does work. And I would like to see that. Believe it or not, my neighbor's gonna kill me on this one, but the safety of speed. Listen, people, they drive, they don't care, like I told you this morning. But roundabouts do work on controlling the speed.
Yes.
All right, for example, is Marsh Road, when you get off Hartwood Marsh going to Orange County, those three, and they do enforcement, and trust me, you do not wanna go past 20 miles an hour.
Yeah, so that's great to hear from you. It would be great, not only from you, but from others, if you have locations where you think it might be good to study, where they might occur.
Yeah, but see, you know, the problem is the county has to build it.
Well,
That's a county
yes.
road. See, that's what everybody has to take
Yeah, but
consideration.
if
City
you have
roads
some- you do
and
have
it's
some
county
city
roads.
streets also.
Yeah, if you could put one on Hammock Ridge Road, because Legends, we have 847 homes, and the back, we've had already 3 accidents trying to get out and trying to cross
So
over.
before you leave,
Yeah.
we'll ask you to mark a map with one.
The roundabouts are working on Schofield Road, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Look, it sounds like going forward, there's a lot of good opportunity in putting strong towns, walkability. What I don't wanna lose sight of is, it's like what came first, the chicken or the egg? And we've got some problems here. There's a great deal of damage that has already been done. And it's not just a matter of, it takes over an hour to get from, John Young Parkway to home in Clermont. We also have, and I was gonna touch upon it when we do the HOAs and interconnectivity between HOAs, due to these narrower roads, we have response times problems in Clermont, where first responders could take anywhere from 8 to 12 minutes to get to a potential victim or somebody who's suffering a heart attack or whatever. So if things don't change, we just keep moving forward with a life safety issue here. That's number one. Number two, due to overdevelopment, people are coming down and renting more than they are buying. So a smart investor is gonna rent for 6 months in Lake County, go up to Seminole County, going into Orange County to find out what is the better environment for them and their family. That said, you run the risk of having thousands of homes empty, where people aren't making, I moved down here, I don't rent, I own, I take a lot of pride in my home. So, if we're gonna become this commuter transient county, I don't think that's good, but.
Tourism-based business and.
Right, so, based on what you're doing, it sounds like we have some good opportunities moving forward, but please don't lose sight that, and we talked about this, Hartle Road is probably one of the best examples because they wanna build another HOA on Hartle Road, and if you follow Hartle Road all the way down, it's one big dead-end street. So you've got a problem there. There's nowhere to go on Hartle.
The areas you're saying that you're seeing the fire response areas, I'd like to get that on one of our maps.
Well, the chief was talking about how the fire station on Hardwood Marsh Road has problems getting into Wellness Way. And that's across the street, and he's 10 minutes to get into Wellness Way, because Schofield is only 1 lane in and 1 lane out. So when everybody, and I'm preaching to the choir, when everybody is either making a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn on the Hardwood Marsh Road, this isn't New York where a fire truck is gonna push you out of the way. They're nice down here, they wait for an opening. But you could start right there. And as I said, Wellness Way is right across the street from that fire station, and he's still got 10 minutes to get in there.
That's what I'm looking at.
Yes, sir.
Is that a city or county fire department?
That's city. That's city.
City Fire Department, County Road.
Yeah, it's
City, county.
And then they're telling us when Hancock opens up, it'll be faster, which won't, because now you're turning a 2-lane road that a fire truck has to leave the firehouse to a 4-lane road. okay? And you really think they're gonna pay attention to the signal? Nah.
Who told me last night that it has a narrow right-of-way? It has a right-of-way that cannot be allowed widening.
Oh, that was the other gentleman by 27. The right away is too narrow to expand the fifth lane that they're
On
trying to.
Hancock.
No, not on Hancock.
I thought it was on.
Oh, on Hancock, no, Hancock's too narrow. You're not gonna widen that road because you're gonna have to eminent domain 32 homes, and that's already in the minutes of 2016 from Lake County.
We thought maybe that would be a good one to have the separated bicycle golf cart lane. It cannot be widened.
Well, then explain to me why Legends don't have sidewalks on the west side of their community. If you had sidewalks on the other side, they got a lot of right of way over there, and you could put your 6 foot. I mean, just like Cartland Landing, the brand new community, they have 6 foot wide, and they have both directions.
And are you talking about Hardwood Marsh or Hancock?
No, I'm talking about Hancock.
All right, so we'll ask you to mark a map.
I'll be more than
That's
happy
what we're
after the meeting.
So maybe we are ready to end this meeting, and then a couple of you will help us pointing out things on the aerial maps. And maybe you.
What about utilities? Because I know there's a gentleman here from Wellness Way, and I know utilities is such an issue. Or infrastructure. So utility, I mean, he's here from Wellness Way, and I would like to.
So what is that concern?
There's a huge concern. There's only one water line that goes down to the Wellness Way area. We've had it break twice. And when that water line breaks, there's no firefighter capacity whatsoever.
And this is Wellness Way within the city or within the county?
Within the city,
Right.
yeah.
Isn't there also an issue with water pressure?
Yeah, water pressure and all
That's
that.
coming next.
So,
East
yeah,
of Wellness Way.
water is a big issue.
But aren't they looking for land, if I remember correctly, they're looking for land there to put a new well, correct?
Right below.
Correct.
Yeah.
But
They're trying to solve the problem.
yeah, no, but the only problem is there's no redundancy.
Because there will be once they put that in there, they'll tie it back in. I believe if I remember correctly, they
Hopefully you don't burn down in the meantime.
Oh, no, it's not like a problem now.
That city of Clermont, water service,
Yes.
Correct. And
which
they're-
is the annexation.
Well,
Yep.
They are working on acquiring the land and solving that problem. It is a problem. That is something that needs to be fixed.
The other, of course, utility issue that we've seen down here, and heard about from a number of people who've done projects downtown are the raised, the telephone poles run through the walls.
If I might like also, sorry, yeah, you were gonna.
No, it's just bury it.
Okay, like, yeah, bury them. Also, if we could design utilities, like, or in this case, here in downtown, it might be just redesign the thing, but in new communities, like, utilities affect the landscaping that we can use. And I see that a lot downtown. We want to plant, for example, a lot of street trees, because I will maintain that trees are infrastructure. We should be planting more of them. But it's very difficult to do so when the gas line is going this way and the sewer line is also parallel to it, but there's also a water line going, like, it's very difficult to take advantage of the limited space that we have.
So is that the reason that there are crepe myrtles instead of shade trees in the new streetscape?
No.
That would be,
He can help.
I'll answer this.
all right.
So there was a specific, so what the concern was the drip edge of the tree does not allow the roots to grow properly. So if you look at some of these downtown oaks, they have been stunted and they're never going to reach their capacity. They never become a shade tree because the drip edge is so confined and it never gets under there. So the discussion on that was, what can we do that's still a big tree that has a drip edge that will still grow, that we can still get the water to the roots, that will be a healthy tree. I'm not sure if he's here, but one of the council members from Kings Ridge, they actually had to pull out 50 oak trees, and this community's old, and they were, they're great live oaks, but they had to go pull out every single live oak in that parking lot because the drip edge just wouldn't do it. So they brought in the horticulture expert, and I was ready to say, hell no, you are not cutting down all these oak trees But he came in and goes, they're just never gonna be healthy. They've been here for however many number of years. He said, look at the growth. This is how big they should be. This is how big they are. They have to come down.
But they weren't providing shade?
They created the shade, they were diseased, they never got healthy because they couldn't get the nutrients in the water that they needed through the root system. So when this was discussed, it was, what trees can we put up that are going to be healthy? So that, I heard you mention that last night, and I was gonna touch base with you and say, there was a specific discussion about what's the best one.
Were there other species that were discussed outside of the agricultural levels?
There's a, well, now you have to go back to Sean and Main Street and all, but there was a discussion of why are we, what are we doing in oak trees was specifically because it's beautiful. I mean, everybody loves a lot of it. Correct. Yeah, it was specifically done to make it a healthier tree ecosystem rather than the oak tree that, and if Kurt was here, he could give us, he actually happens to be an arborist, but.
All right, we surpassed our time, let's do the map marking.
Okay.
Ben?
Yeah, if you wanna see me mark anything on the map.
Yeah.
I know
You just mark it on the map. And maybe it's yellow, or is it yellow text right on it or something. Thank you.
All right, thank you, folks. Thank you.
Maybe you should do that presentation
But I'll be back.
It's there. We're just ready to vote on it.
Thank you, John. John, could you send contact information for the mayor?
Yeah.